the Olympics opening ceremony of 2024 looked quite different than years past. People have used the words. Some say normal and romantic. Other people say satanic, degenerate, distracting. What are your thoughts on the 2024 Olympics opening ceremony?
So I'll say this. I didn't watch the whole thing. My understanding is long.
It
And
was
the
hard to
most...
watch, by the way, if you didn't catch it live, because I was trying to look up clips and they were being taken down on YouTube left and right. So I had to find some
Uh-huh.
obscure clips on Twitter.
Right. So
But
just the parts that were most widely paraded as being contentious, my view is pretty simple, which is that hundreds of thousands of kids around the world are watching the opening ceremonies, I would imagine. Because these athletes, they inspire the next generation of young people to pick up sports. And if you're showing what basically amounts to pornography or some sort of culture destroying transgenderism on the opening ceremony that most people are watching around the world with their kids, it's hugely inappropriate in my view. So if people want to put on some sort of performance that they think is artistically significant and so on, but that is disrespectful. I mean, I say the kids watching is one thing, but it was disrespectful to a lot of religious, not that you have to pander to people's religious sensibilities, but if you know the eyes of the world are going to be on you, then you have a certain obligation to present the best foot forward. If you spit in the face of everybody who's watching, if you insult the decency and intelligence of everybody who's watching, if you take what's supposed to be a celebratory event for everybody, including children, and you make it, as I say, some sort of pornography, then that's disgusting. That would be my take on that. There's an old tradition of linking gymnastic exercises. Let's take that broadly to mean sports and athletics, with the state's goal of inculcating high ideals in the people. Okay, so like athletics and state ideals have always gone closely together because you have an opportunity to inspire people to high ideals, noble ideals, athletic excellence, beauty. It can also be fun. It can also be many different kinds of things. But, it shouldn't be what it was in those clips that circulated. They just completely screwed up. It's more than screwing up. It's deliberate insult. So I take the side of the people who felt that should have been omitted. Let's put it mildly.
mm,
And all of that is to say that you can still criticize religion. You can still have your opinion about sex and gender. You can still do your Dionysian artistic, whatever, okay, or orgiastic revelries. But you shouldn't do it when the eyes of the world are on you. You shouldn't do it when the eyes of children are on you. And you shouldn't debase athletics and make it some sort of sideshow like it was in those clips. Okay. Again, I can't comment on all of the opening ceremonies. I assume the rest were largely decent.
yeah, I didn't see the entire opening ceremony, but I saw what I managed to dig up through some clips, which was the blue guy, the nearly naked blue guy that was supposed to be Dionysus, I believe. And there was the recreation of the Last Supper. There was the drag show. There was the metal performance with the metal band from France. I'm blanking out on the name right now. But those were the four major clips that I saw. And my initial reaction,
Like drag show. No, there's no, the word drag show should not appear when you're thinking about athletic ceremony opening games watched by the whole world. Like, it
there,
just shouldn't.
my reaction actually came in waves where I was watching the videos, and at first I thought, this is just fucking odd. Like, whatever this is, I'm not even sure what I'm watching, but it's odd and it just doesn't fit something that's you would think would be designed to funnel as many eyes as possible onto a global stage and not be a distraction to the athletes who are ultimately those are the stars of the
Absolutely.
Olympics. And so in terms of being a non-distraction and being a universal funnel into getting people excited and amped for the events, it did not do that, at least not for me.
No, it ended up having the opposite effect. It turned a lot of
Yeah.
people. I know people boycotted the Olympics because of that. Some advertisers did. I know some viewers did, which I don't think is correct. I don't think it's fair to the athletes. But yeah, it had the opposite effect.
Yeah, there was the second part of my reaction was, okay, there's a guy who designed this, the creative director who designed this ceremony, and a bunch of people came together, and probably an hour before that ceremony, everyone thought this is going to be the fucking thing that people are talking about. We're going to change the Olympic ceremony. Where, I'm going to leave my mark. I'm going to be super creative. I'm going to shoot my fucking shot on the global stage. And going into a creative pursuit, I know what that's like to take shots, not on the global stage with, millions of people watching live, but just like things that you do and then you realize it did not have the intended effect, or people are just disliking it. So I did feel, I don't know if sympathetic is the right word, but like I felt some sort of, I felt a respect for the guy taking the shot as an artistic show separate from the Olympics. It made me think and talk about it. Like I'm talking about it right now. And I respect that as a creator, getting people to think about it. And the third part of my reaction, which, maybe this is the washed up college baseball player in me with, parts of my degenerate soul coming out. But some of the best baseball players and some of the best athletes that I've played with were, degenerate drinkers, drug doers. There's a big side of sports that is degeneracy. And I think there's a lot of athletes who have that in their spirit. Not that it's meant to be shown on the global stage, but when people were talking about degeneracy in sports and how that has no place in the Olympic ceremony, the opening ceremony, I agree. And then there's also part of me that is like, well, if you were to poll athletes, how many of you are, engage in degenerate behaviors, doping? The Olympic Village is, essentially an orgy, from what I hear in many aspects. It's almost like the Olympic ceremony reflected some aspects of athletic degeneracy that aren't normally given the main stage. And I don't know if they should be. Maybe that should just be locker room talk for athletes behind closed doors of like, what'd you do this weekend? Or, just like shooting the shit amongst guys. But though, for better or worse, those were the three parts of my reaction: the oddness of it, the artistic value of it, and the degenerate nature of athletes being somewhat represented by the opening ceremony.
Yeah, that's good. It's a nuanced reaction to what a lot of people had a pretty unnuanced reaction to, which was just straight up rejection and moralizing and posturing and all of that. I was guilty of that myself to some extent. But I would say a few things. So, first of all, even if you accept the degeneracy side, let's call it the Dionysian side. Okay, fine. Sex, drugs, drinking, partying, whatever. There is a big question. Is that appropriate to show? And if you want to make reference to it, was there a better way of making reference to it? Because it wasn't just the Dionysian aspect or element. You could imagine Dionysius being part of the opening ceremonies in a sort of like subtle, only adults will get it nod to that part of, if you wanted to include it at all, which is an open question. Maybe you decide the noble lie, self-censorship, and just present the best foot forward and leave the rest of it, unsaid, or wink, nudge, that kind of thing. But the other part of it was the Last Supper, what seemed like insult, like a deliberate insult to Christianity and to religious sensibilities, which again was probably uncalled for. And you can imagine different ways of making that Dionysian point that were not so openly insulting or openly pornographic, if you prefer to put it that way. So I would say that that's a part of it. And then my hunch, just a hunch, is that underlying that performance is also that kind of idea that, look, Olympics is all about inclusivity. We've got countries from all over the world. Okay, fine. Some are not represented officially, like Russia, right? You're not allowed to show their flag or play their music because everybody knows that Russians are bad. But okay, still, generally speaking, we're inclusive. We're going to include so many different sports. There's Olympic breakdancing and there's Olympic this, that, and the other thing. And our inclusivity is going to be reflected in the fact that we also, include transgenders and bearded women and all of these other sorts of things. And the subtle attack on Christianity may be part of this like view that we're even more inclusive than that, that we're, so it's like I saw that performance as the reduction to absurdity of the principle of inclusivity, where we're so inclusive that we're basically going to insult a lot of people. We're going to bring in material that's extraneous and unnecessary and has an effect contrary to the intended one. Again, I would have watched with my kids, I didn't, and so on. I'm not the only one. I'm probably one of millions in that position. So and another thing is art. Okay, this is a big question. I do want to just state it as it were for the record, not to hammer home Plato and Aristotle and that all of these are old questions, but the relationship between politics and art is an old question. Okay, it's written about not only in those books, more recently in Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and we're faced with it in this example. Okay, art somehow seems like it should not be subject to censorship, to political oversight, to moralizing, to all of that. Somehow art should be allowed to tell the truth, or it should also be allowed to lie. It should be allowed to invent. It should be allowed to reflect. Art should somehow be an area of free creativity. And it seems totalitarian almost, fascist almost, to say, or authoritarian, you must make sure that your public art performances match our political principles and ideals. So if you watch the Chinese opening ceremonies or the Russian opening ceremonies, maybe there were people who thought, oh, look, that's totalitarian because they had their athletes do like classical performances. And that's the state abusing art to prop up the ideals of the state. So on one hand, it seems like art should be free. On the other hand, it seems like this Olympic example is an example of kind of state-sanctioned art, if it is inclusive, if it is meant to be basically DEI performance, as it were. So all of these issues are in play. My view, again, largely based on the Platonic tradition, there should be pockets of society where art can be free. But art does also have a political responsibility, and it does also must have, especially in events like this, I would say, political oversight. So the smoothest way would have been a subtler reference to the Dionysian element in life, in sports. And, the French used to be known for subtlety. But here they sort of did not practice their historical virtue.